Good evening and welcome to the Town of Cary Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. I now call this meeting to order. Our board clerk, Julie Mitchell, will now take roll for this evening.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight, Andy Coe will not be able to join us this evening. For the record, I will verbally confirm the following board members present as present: Lisa Michelson, Bashana Etten, Chris Johnson, Jeff Moncrief, Stephen Crutchfield, Sean McAndrew, Mike Roselli, and Ken George.
Thank you. First of all, this is the start of a new year for the board. So the most appropriate thing to do is I'd like to welcome new board members. We have 4 new members this year. A couple are alternates, so one of those is not here. But I'd first of all like to welcome Bohana Eaton and Ken George, Lisa Michelson, and Sal Camarada. We look forward to you serving on the board, for me, it's been an honor to be on the board. It's an awful lot to learn. You'll pick it up quick, so we're glad you're here. And the good news is the board, once again, is represented by people that have great background for the town of Cary. Everyone brings something unique to the table, so I think we really have a good board this year. So again, welcome to the board. The Cary Community Plan will continue to be the guiding document for this board. Our role is to function as citizen advisors to the town council, who will make the final decision on all rezoning activity. You board members will offer opinions based on the Cary Community Plan document and of course play a very important role in advising our town leaders. While this is a public meeting, it is not a public hearing. There is no opportunity for the public to speak during this meeting. However, if you do have comments about any of these items, we encourage you to reach out to the staff by email or phone. You may reach out to the board members through email. You may also contact the council directly through email or during the public speaks out portion of any regularly scheduled town council meetings. These meetings may be streamed live on the Town of Cary website and will be posted to YouTube. All past planning and zoning meetings are available to view on YouTube. First up for tonight would be the adoption of our agenda for this evening. Unless there's any changes, would someone like to make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item up is approval of the regular meeting minutes, and this would be from our September 18th meeting. Unless there's any changes or suggestions to those meetings, would someone make a motion to approve the September 18th meeting minutes?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Before we get into the first case, I just want to recap for the new board members the meeting flow. I do remember back when I was a new member, it took me a while to get all this down. I know you've watched meetings before and may have even participated, but the way the meeting is going to flow is we're going to introduce a case. Our incredible staff will come forward and update us on that case. There's time for the applicant to also come forward. We then are allowed as a board to ask questions of the staff and the applicant. After that, we normally would take a motion and then we would discuss the motion, just comments only from the board members, and then we would vote. And again, our board is citizen opinions based on the Cary Community Plan and our view of something. The town council is not looking for us to parrot them. They really want your feedback and your opinions on these cases and rezoning activity that come before the board. So it is really you as an individual offering up your thoughts on how this is, again, based on the Cary Community Plan. And with that, we will call our first case forward. It is 22 REZ 18, Trinity Road Townhouses. And I believe Erin Puckett, our principal planner, will present the case.
Thank you, and good evening, Board. This is a request to rezone approximately 2.85 acres located between Trinity Road and Old Trinity Circle. The subject property is an assemblage of two parcels that are currently vacant. It is surrounded by residential lots of varying size, as well as a number of vacant properties. For context, this site is located about 0.3 miles north of Chapel Hill Road and just west of I-40 and the Cary-Raleigh border. Wake Med Soccer Park is also south of the site. According to Cary's GIS, there is a possible stream buffer impacting a small portion of the southeast corner of the site. Field determination of such features is required at time of development plan review. Trinity Road is currently a 2-lane road and is designated as a 3-lane thoroughfare on the future roadway widths map, with street side trail on the west side and sidewalk on the east. This site would be subject to dedication of right-of-way and construction of improvements for this site's half of the ultimate cross-section along the frontage. A traffic study was not required for the number of dwellings that would be permitted under the proposal. According to the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan, there is a future street side trail planned for the west side of Trinity Road opposite this site, and a portion of that trail is existing south of this site. The site is currently split zoned, with a portion in Residential 12 or R12 zoning, and the remainder in Transitional Residential or TR. And the applicant proposes to rezone the site to Transitional Residential Conditional Use. The applicant has also offered 7 zoning conditions, which include limiting the uses to detached dwellings, townhouses, and associated accessory uses. This would allow the site to be developed either entirely as one of these housing types or a mixed residential development with both. At the allowed density in transitional residential zoning, 6 units per acre, the site could develop with up to 17 dwellings. Additional conditions include ensuring at least 9 units are in buildings of 4 dwellings or fewer, providing a minimum of 2,000 square feet of community gathering space, which is more than triple the LDO requirement, ensuring all units have 2-car garages, providing wiring for future electric vehicle charging in garages, and providing several architectural commitments, including a minimum of 4 windows on side elevations, and at least 2 of these building materials on all facades. So they can choose 2 from this pick list. In addition to these conditions, development of the assemblage will be held to additional requirements of the LDO, including a 50-foot Type A streetscape along the Trinity Road frontage. And please note that local streets do not require a streetscape for residential uses. So Deerwood and Old Trinity would not require a streetscape. A 40-foot Type A buffer would also be required along the southern property line if the site is developed with any townhouses. If developed as detached dwellings only, a 30-foot Type B buffer, which is represented by this dashed line, would apply instead. And within these buffers, there are limitations on disturbance, typically limited to areas needed for road improvements, pedestrian networks, and utility crossings. The site would also be required to follow LDO requirements to prioritize preservation of any champion trees identified at time of development plan, or replacement of caliper inches if their preservation is not feasible. An analysis of this request against the Imagine Cary Community Plan finds that policies in the Live, Work, Shape, and Serve chapters apply most directly. The proposal would provide additional housing choices in the area, as the townhouses or smaller lot detached dwellings that could be developed under this zoning are somewhat unique in the immediate area. The applicant has not specified in their zoning conditions which of these housing types would be developed on the site. Provision of these smaller housing types could also help support Cary's existing and future workforce. This location is also proximate to downtown Cary and the I-40 interchange. The proposed uses also appear to provide an appropriate use transition to the variety of residential lot sizes and zoning districts that surround the site, and conditions that speak to architectural commitments and community gathering space help address the appearance and quality of the development. A commitment to wiring for future EV charging also helps address the SERV policy regarding sustainable energy. The Future Growth Framework Map designates the site as being within a heritage neighborhood. These areas encourage the widest variety of housing types and lot sizes, and transitional residential is identified as an appropriate zoning district. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held in May, and 22 citizens participated. They had questions and comments regarding traffic, future improvements of Trinity Road, the proposed price point of the homes, stormwater mitigation, and general questions about the rezoning process. Staff also received 3 additional emails and 3 311 inquiries after the neighborhood meeting and prior to public hearing. One email cited traffic concerns, the other inquiries were seeking details about this case or the process, and 2 messages were in opposition to the request. A public hearing was held at the August council meeting. There were 3 speakers and 7 written comments. Comments included a preference for detached dwellings at this location, concerns with the proposed density, existing and future traffic on Trinity Road, site drainage, and the aesthetics of the homes. One written comment was in support of the project. Council members had several clarifying questions regarding LDO requirements for parking and traffic studies, and a question about how many units could be built under the current zoning. Staff verified that 12 units could be built under today's zoning without going through the rezoning process. Some council members commented on potential issues with transitions and aesthetics, especially if no zoning conditions are offered. They also asked staff to look into traffic counts and sightline issues in this area. And I would like to note that Cary staff are working with NCDOT to survey sightlines and traffic counts around the intersection of Brandywine and Trinity Road. Since the public hearing, the applicants did add conditions to exceed the LDO requirement for community gathering space, offer massing and architectural requirements, provide garages for all units, and wiring for EV charging in all garages. Staff's preliminary recommendation is for consistency with the Imagine Cary Community Plan. We found that the request is supported by a number of policies in the live and work chapters, as it provides for smaller lot housing types less common in this area. The housing types permitted could make reasonable use or form transitions to the variety of zoning and lot sizes in the area, and commitments to increased gathering space and architectural treatments address aesthetics and quality. And the inclusion of wiring for future EV charging does help address one of the SERV chapter policies. This concludes my presentation. The applicant's representative is also here to provide comments, and then I'm available for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And board, thank you for your time this evening. My name is Ryan Johnson, and what we're looking to do here is basically have a high-quality, energy-efficient neighborhood that we can bring to Cary, and we look forward to working with you and the town of Cary in this, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. We'll let you know if we have any questions. It'll be just a minute.
All right, perfect.
Okay. Normally, just again for the new members, I normally go to the right or the left. I will not do that tonight.
Thank you.
I would actually like to pick on Ken, but I'm not. So we'll start with questions, and we'll start with you, sir, okay?
You pick on me.
Well, yes.
I may have missed it or not. Was there a maximum amount of units that were planned under this site plan, or is it just too early to know?
They currently would just default to the maximum allowed in transitional residential, which is 6 units per acre. That would allow up to 17 units on this site.
17 units. And you said the original zoning would have allowed 12?
12, yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, Jeff.
Just specifically with regard to the SERV, initiative, I was just trying to understand, obviously a lot of discussion of traffic and volume and those kind of things, and there were no conditions specifically offered related to that, area of the Cary plan. Where did you see that the SERV unit, if you could just help me understand how that was kind of identified as a being supported in this request?
Sure. So the most direct condition that we saw as addressing SERV would be for that future electric vehicle charging, so that there is a SERV policy that speaks to sustainable energy being one of the considerations. So that's where we see sort of that direct tie. I will also just add that our LDO standards for things like tree preservation, buffers, and streetscapes are fairly stringent. So those things will kick in even if there is no condition. So in some ways, some of those SERV policies regarding environmental policies will still have to be addressed because of the LDO requirements. But yes, there's only one zoning condition that kind of speaks to part of SERV, which is the electric vehicle charging.
Gotcha. And then the only other question I had, I believe I saw in reviewing the notes to the community meeting, these are higher end, right? Price point near, if I've heard that correctly, this is a higher end. I think it said at one point in somewhere, $1 million kind of unit type price point.
We can't talk about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
price point.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize that.
all right.
I'm an old member who didn't know that. I apologize. Then never mind. I disregard that. That's it. That's all I had.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Sean?
With the existing zoning being at 12 already and no other conditions really stated where, or the closest thing alluding to it is, a minimum of 9 units, in buildings of 4 or less, is there a reason that it needs to be rezoned? I guess that's kind of the, a crux of the, they already have 9 units. The rezoning allows them to go to 17, but there's no commitment on a realistic number. So are we looking at least 13? What is the full justification for the flexibility?
I can let the applicant speak to that a little. I will just note that the transitional residential zoning allows townhomes where the existing R12 does not.
Right.
So even though they could get 12 units today, some of those would have to be detached. I believe they want the flexibility that they could put in the maximum number of townhouses if they so desired to do that.
So if they go with townhouses, that's how they get to 17. Otherwise, there's a detached combination.
Correct. So the R12 zoning that's there today, that half, or it's a little over half of the site, could only be detached residential.
Right, but what I'm also saying is to get to 17, it would have to be townhomes. You couldn't have
Well,
semi-detached.
so
That's the part of the question.
I see. Well, let me just speak to the density portion. So the density in TR, or transitional residential, goes up to 16 units per acre, and that's regardless of type. So there could be a way to fit those smaller lot detached units and still get the 17.
Okay.
Is that,
Yeah, that helps.
sorry about that. And did you want the applicant to speak to their planned program?
So that's a good question, because one of the things we were looking at when we started analyzing the spot is there's a lot of mature trees, and one of the things we want to do was keep a lot of the trees, and we're going to create buffers. Well, with our initial plan was to create buffers along the streets so that we kind of have some separation, so you kind of create a community, and that allows also for the extra gathering space. And by having townhouses, we're able to bring them close together, because think about setbacks for single family. So we could move into single family, but now we're going to be clearing more of the trees off the property. And then we're going to have houses facing the streets. And what we're looking is to create just 2 entrances that come into, can I show them this or?
It's not a zoning
Cool,
exhibit.
got it, okay. So what we were looking at as we were analyzing that, we decided to do the townhouses so that we could bring them closer together and then still have the same amenities, but to keep a lot of the natural space, or the natural areas, which we thought would make it a better, community for people to live in.
Would it make sense that there's the conditions for that, because that would give comfort, I'll say to other community members, that there is a sense that the developer really wants to keep the aesthetics, of that area very, very similar, especially with the buffer that you were describing. Okay.
I don't know if that's,
Yeah, so I believe what you're getting to is the fact that there's not currently a zoning condition for those
Right.
additional streetscapes or to
Right.
increase buffers, so I believe that's.
Yeah, that's the question is why, go ahead.
I was going to say, but they are, like the 50-foot streetscape is a requirement.
The 50-foot streetscape is a
doesn't-
requirement. The local streets, so remember, this has 3 street frontages, one that's a thoroughfare and then 2 that are locals. Local streetscapes would not be required for this housing type.
And one of the things is we did the townhouses so we could have that streetscape, because if we didn't, if we did single family, they would be right up on the road, and we would not have that buffer. So, I
You
guess,
would need to commit to that through a zoning condition
Yeah.
for it to be
got it.
considered.
All right. I'm open to that.
I think that gets at most of my questions. Thank you.
Mike, any questions?
Yeah, I did have a question. There was was there not a 30-foot buffer against the property to the south?
That's correct. So there would be a southern property, and if it's townhouses, it would be a 40-foot buffer. If it's detached units, it would be a 30-foot buffer.
Sure, gotcha.
So there will definitely be some buffer on the south.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are codified in the LDL, so I don't see a reason to make a condition for them. Thank you.
Now we'll go back down to Lisa.
Is it,
Any questions?
is it allowable to ask where the entrance for the,
Yes, it is.
okay.
Please
where-
do.
Where will that be?
It's a little early to have that information currently. That is something that would be reviewed at time of development plan by our transportation staff. A certain separation from adjacent intersections, those types of things all have to be considered. So I don't believe we know that level of detail at this time.
You're not planning to, like I drove by and went around the site, the power lines are very low on Trinity Road and the power is right there. So is that going to exist still? You're going to build around it?
It's possible the power lines could still exist. Typically, Cary's ordinance requires undergrounding of the overhead lines if it's feasible at time of development plan. Duke Power typically doesn't consider it feasible if it's less than about 1,000 feet of frontage. This site unfortunately has 3 very short frontages, but anything that's installed within the site will need to be underground. But it is possible that those overhead lines could remain along the frontage.
Any other questions? Bahana, any questions?
I had the same question as Lisa about if we have any idea where that entrances are going to be, but
Okay, that's fine.
that was,
So you good?
I'm good.
All right. Ken, any questions?
So yes, thank you. So if I understand the LDO correctly, so if no rezoning takes place, then 12 could be built, but that also means independent, with nothing's redone, those single families could be built with no stormwater mitigation whatsoever. Is that right, with 12 individual homes?
I'm going to turn to my stormwater colleague.
And would that be, how would it differ? I guess that was my follow-up, was how would it differ with this versus 12, just 12 houses?
It wouldn't. The,
Okay.
the size of the subdivision, subdividing it into lots would trigger the stormwater regulations.
Okay, and no difference with the TR versus the current 12?
Nope, because it would be based on the proposed impervious and not the actual unit or number.
And would typically with the townhouses, there'd be do we not know the difference between the 17, what typically would be a impervious versus 12 single families?
It can vary based on the size of the
Okay.
home and size of the building footprint.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
So also the applicant mentioned 2 things, I guess, that we were supposed to disregard the high quality because we don't specify quality, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
correct, other
Okay.
than the things that they have spoken to, such as
The materials,
architectural
like,
commitments.
okay,
things of
got that.
nature.
And then, but he also mentioned energy efficiency. Is there any specifications given for any above standard energy efficiency? Because I saw it, heard energy efficient.
Right, so the one condition that's been offered that would exceed the LDO requirement is that they're offering that wiring for EV charging for all units. So that's not an LDO requirement, that is something that's a little extra.
Okay, but it doesn't speak to energy efficiency. It just speaks to having available charging for an electric car. So I don't know if the applicant, when he mentioned that, there's no anything above what the building requirements would be for energy efficiency, that he's not offered anything addition.
I understand.
That's my
Yes,
question.
correct. That hasn't been offered. Some of those things, when we start getting really specific in terms of like insulation values, things like that would be incredibly hard to enforce through a zoning condition.
Okay.
The applicant can speak to it further
Okay,
if
yes,
you'd
if he's
like,
got
but
some-
yes,
okay.
it would not be a zoning condition.
So we did have 4 other conditions that, because she said that it couldn't be enforced through zoning, that we took out of the application.
Okay, that helps.
So,
That helps.
yeah, so everything we build that we currently build is above code. We aim for the next code up, so whatever code is, that the state's looking at now, that's what we shoot for.
Okay.
So,
But we don't inspect above past code.
Right, but there would not be a way for us to enforce
inspect
that
past
through a
code.
zoning
Okay.
condition. They could still do it, and it could be part of their marketing, but it's not something we can enforce through zoning.
Okay, that's all I have.
Good? Perfect. Just a couple of questions from me. One for, their height hasn't been specified, has it? For if a townhome was built, did I miss height earlier?
It would default to the LDO requirement, which is 35 feet, whether
35.
it's detached or townhome, same height
35,
limit.
okay. And can you show me or tell me where the nearest either multifamily or townhome is? I didn't see it within the circle of notified. Is there,
I would have to double check, and I might need to get that information.
I don't think
back to you.
there is any.
I don't believe there is any in the notification area, depending on how large an area you'd like
But
us,
there could be something maybe right outside the notification area.
possibly, yes.
It just wouldn't have been part of our discussion.
Right, so, yes, and I apologize, I don't know where the closest
okay.
one would be, but I could find that
I
information.
just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss it. So, I mean, if it's outside of the circle, then that's fine, but I
Okay.
just wanted to make sure, because
Yes, I
didn't
believe it
see
is outside of that immediate area shown on the map.
And this is 2 separate parcels today, correct?
Yes.
Which of the parcels could the townhomes be built with the current zoning?
So if you take a look at the existing zoning map that's shown here, the darker green color is the transitional residential today. So townhomes could be built in that portion of the property. The yellow is R12 and would only allow detached dwellings, and there are a few other uses that could be permitted in R12.
Okay, and then on Deerwood, there's no buffer required for Deerwood? Is
Correct.
that regardless if it's the current zoning? If it's the detached or the townhome, would it matter?
No,
buffer?
so there's no residential streetscape on those local streets. So
So-
regardless of whether they were townhomes or detached, there would not be a required streetscape.
And would the town require, like today, there's, trees are all the way right down to the road, but could those be removed possibly? I don't think any of them are heritage type. They could all be removed
It's quite
at
possible.
the discretion of the builder, right?
Yes, so today, if someone were to develop that site and those areas are not required buffers or streetscapes, they could be cleared with the caveat that if there was a champion tree, something of that nature in there, we would evaluate it further, see if there was a way to save it. If it's going right where the road needs to go, then of course it has to come out and be replanted. But if it's, in an area that could easily be preserved and still allow the site to be developed, we would always push for its preservation.
Okay, and then again, I just want to make sure I'm really clear. For the R12, that is detached only as of today.
Right, no townhomes could be built in the R12 portion.
And what else could be built there besides a detached home?
Several other residential types can be built, and then a number of open space or government-type uses. There aren't many uses outside of residential that can be built.
Correct, there's no commercial allowed?
Correct, no commercial.
No
nothing
office?
at that intensity, no office.
Strictly,
Right. It would be
okay.
predominantly open space, residential, or governmental uses.
Okay, awesome. Does anyone else have any questions that they thought of that they didn't ask?
Yeah, and along the lines of the same question I asked about the serve, the specific piece was kind of traffic and migration around different areas in the broader picture related to the traffic study. And I believe in the public hearing, there was some discussion about, okay, this specific development, as small as it is, doesn't require one,
Correct.
but is one warranted? Just some commentary around that, please.
Yes, and so I believe what you're speaking to is the applicant could voluntarily do some kind of traffic memo. We have had rezoning applicants do that in the past where a traffic study isn't required, but they do some data collection. They hire a transportation engineer and submit a memo to us that gives some information. I will say, and this was in the staff report, but one of the things that council asked was that staff look into that matter a little further, specifically that intersection at Brandywine and Trinity, where we know there are some traffic concerns. And our transportation staff is working with NCDOT. In fact, I just heard this afternoon that they had their their bi-monthly meeting with NCDOT last week, and NCDOT has agreed to look at that intersection, so they would be surveying for things like traffic counts, crashes, and sight distance. And we don't have an exact timeline on that, but they have added to their list. They will be doing that. So that's good news.
Okay, great, thank you.
Stephen,
Any other questions?
I did, so.
Go ahead.
So what is there any requirement for, that it's their choice for one or two or three if it's allowed by DOT or Cary? There's no entrance requirement for roads in this. They could have one in.
It will depend on the separation and a number of other things. So that's something that we would be reviewing at time of development plan.
Okay.
The-
And it sounds like the entrance is more likely to be on one of the local streets, that it's probably not likely they'll get an entrance on
From DOT
Trinity.
to put on Brandywine, on Trinity. And I don't see this neighborhood doesn't connect to Brandywine, so why would the Brandywine be even discussed? Is it because if there's a light there, it provides some separation of traffic? Is that why Brandywine would be considered?
There are general concerns from citizens that we've heard in the area, and because this rezoning is right down the street from that intersection, the concern was that additional units, no matter how many, could add traffic to an area that already potentially has some sight distance issues or some safety issues. So that was an intersection that specifically was brought to our attention by a number of the citizens. And it sounds like perhaps NCDOT is aware that that intersection is of concern.
Okay. It does appear that there's at least three ways to get onto Trinity Road from this neighborhood, so it's not like it's a one way out, one way in, one way out.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Aaron?
That's it.
One comment I want to make about Trinity Road is we had a lot of people at the neighborhood meeting talk about traffic on Trinity, and even at the town council meeting was about Trinity, but town council and staff had brought up that it was a state road, and we couldn't even do anything to it because the state's going to dictate everything, so we couldn't provide any additional concessions on that. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Just another question regarding the serve section. Has there been any other just discussions about the possibility of using any kind of solar efficiencies on any of the units?
That condition has not been offered. The applicant could speak to that if they wish.
what was your question about?
Just whether or not any kind of solar efficiencies have been.
So we thought about that, but the one concern we had was all the tall trees there and what your efficiency would be. 'Cause we
Right.
done
I
that.
guess what I thought I heard was that most of the trees were coming down other than the two sides, but maybe I misheard.
Our plan, I don't know how much I could speak to it, but we were trying to keep the majority of them
Okay.
around the perimeter to create a forest setting.
Okay.
So when we start to do that, you lose the opportunity of gaining, solar exposure that you need for solar. So
So are the units planning to be, I guess, cleared individually, or is it going to be more clear cutting?
we'll have a development plan that will actually clear the section where we're putting the road in the unit. So kind of almost like taking a circle in the donut hole in the middle.
Gotcha.
Is what our intent is.
Okay.
That's all I have. Everybody good now? Okay, thank you. Okay, just a reminder for the board that the main thing that we can really go on are the zoning conditions that we see today. You know, things change, land can be sold, so just kind of keep that in mind, that we have to go with the conditions that are before us. Having said that, is there anyone that feels like they would like to come forward with a motion for this rezoning?
I'll make a motion.
Go right ahead.
I move that the board find case number 22 REZ 18 to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Would someone like to second that?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, it was your,
No, I think
comments?
they've addressed several of the policies in Carrie's, what we're looking for under live and work, shape and serve. And it seems like most of it it can be done within that area the way, it's not a big change on the zoning either.
Perfect. Mike, did you second?
I did.
Yeah, go ahead, your comments.
Yeah, I find it very consistent with the community in the area. One of the parcels is already zoned for townhomes, could be developed for townhomes without building the streetscape buffer. And this is just bringing that same zoning one parcel over and committing to those buffers. I think it'd be great.
Thanks. Anyone else want to volunteer comments, Jeff? Any comments?
No, I agree that it's consistent. I think the bigger picture is that as this is redeveloped, you know, we're going to see different types of developments than we had in the past. And this is kind of on the beginning edge, even though these others are zoned. You guys right now might be the first to kind of begin that reformation of this area. And so we just want to be mindful of what that does and how that impacts the greater community rather than this specific development. But I do find it to be consistent.
Sean, any comments?
The one area is, yes, two sides are going to have a buffer, but, you know, as in the development, and it's not a condition right now, having, you know, the other two streets having a buffer as is initially designed, you know, I'm thinking, you know, down the road without a condition, if something, you know, doesn't go correctly, I know that's your plan, but what happens if? And so having a condition for the buffers on Deerwood and Old Trinity, I think would make it more consistent for me going forward.
Perfect. Ken, comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's probably I know often you could look and see what could be there if it weren't rezoned. Like, we're here for a reason. And so what could be there could be taking trees down all the way to the road in every corner wherever it wasn't required to be, you know, nothing's, because there's no conditions for that. And you stated the reason you wanted to do this was, and have townhomes, was so that you could maintain something, but it's not a condition. So you're saying one thing, but it's not conditioned. And so we're basically saying it could be, sometimes you do zoning so that you don't get something, the max couldn't be done as it is. But there's no really condition that it's, you know, they all could be facing the road, because there's no condition saying they wouldn't be. It's just possible that they wouldn't be. And I think that would be the reason to have conditions. The council may want conditions for that, or may prefer conditions for that.
Exactly. Any thoughts or comments, Lisa?
No, I mean, I drove around the site and just read the plan, and that southwest corner, which is on Old Trinity, is really like hilly, and I mean, you can build on anything nowadays, of course, but I don't know that you would want to necessarily. So, I mean, I think the buffer will maintain, and the entrance is probably better on Deerwood, just for traffic and all those things. So I think if you're going to build, this is the best mix of, you know, still keeping some trees, but still being able to have more housing.
Mahan, any comments?
Yeah, so looking at it and seeing that there's also TR zoning for Deerwood as well, for some of it, I have a feeling that eventually this might be the future of that little area. That's not the worst thing. I think that's fine. That gives us more housing. That's also important, but I think done mindfully, keeping the trees like you were talking about is really important because you guys are going to be probably, you know, if you do continue with it and don't sell the lot and it doesn't change hands, if it's done right at this corner, there's a potential of precedent that could be very well, you know, if done well, will probably be copied, hopefully, in a good way. So that's kind of my hope. They're allowing, you know, this to go forward. That would be a good example, not something that's negative. That's it. That's my comment.
Perfect, thank you. For myself, I've struggled with this one quite a bit. Normally, I mean, obviously, we need more housing in Cary. That's kind of a given. But I struggle that there's not normally when we see things for townhomes, multifamily, there's more of like a transition. We're getting from something to something, and it helps with that transition. There's really not a transition here, but yet I also get that, I think we said that 12 can be built today regardless, so there would not be a transition. But there really isn't any multifamily anywhere near there. I think there's something right outside of the notification circle, which is, you know, pretty far away, and I know that area is most likely ripe for development as we go in the future years forward. But for myself, because I don't see that transition, and because when we did the community plan, that was done that way on purpose, I feel that the current zoning is most likely the best zoning. So that's just my one individual thought. Any other comments?
I did think about the transition, but I looked at, you know, Deerwood is TR across the road. So if you're already TR on Trinity and you're already TR across the road on Deerwood, then that to me is, you're saying that you are transitioning because you're next to something that's in the same, in this TR. So then to transition, you have to say, well, if I'm going to start with a piece of the parcel, then you can make a case that if you subdivided the R12 part into two equal parts, then transition, you could put TR on one of it, and then you'd be R12. But you got to have somewhere there has to be a spot that R12 ends and TR starts. In this case, there's got to be a 40-foot buffer between the next R12. So that, to me, tells me there's a transition there. But if there were trees preserved on Deerwood, then that would give even more better transition. But I do think that at some point it has to, there is the guy right next to it at some point. But this case, it's 40 feet. So I think that speaks to my transition in my mind.
Perfect. Any other comments? Having said that, we'll close the comments. We'll move to voting. All in favor of the motion to find consistent, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed,
Nay.
nay. So that is, what is that? Help me. Okay, the motion passes. And find it consistent. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is Act 31, minor and technical amendments. These items are, we see these frequently on the board, and I'm not trying to cut into your conversation, by the way, but I just want to explain to the members that so many of these are mandated by other people that unfortunately get to tell Cary what to do. And these tend to be very technical and minor in nature, but they still need to come through the board and they need to come through the town council. So to help us understand that, Lisa, thank you. It's always good to see you.
You too. Good evening. So tonight for your consideration are Act 31 amendments to the Land Development Ordinance and the Town Code. Generally, there are two types of act amendments. The first type implements a policy or a plan initiative, and the second type relates to legally required amendments or technical and minor updates. The amendments proposed tonight are this second type, they include legal updates to align Cary's ordinances with recent North Carolina legislation and other state requirements, as well as a few technical and minor updates. Act 31 has 3 parts. Item A includes legally required amendments for stormwater to align with state statutes. Item B includes clarifications and corrections. And item C includes a minor update to the town code. I'll provide a brief overview of these proposed amendments. So for item A, House Bill 488 became effective on August 16, 2023. This new legislation prohibits local governments from requiring payments from owners of stormwater control measures, or SCMs, for future maintenance or repair costs. In accordance with the previous state statutes, Cary has always required SCM owners to provide funds equal to 15% of the construction cost of the SCM. Cary could then use these funds if the owner failed to perform the necessary maintenance or repairs. Under this new law, local governments may now only require owners to establish a separate account with funds up to equal to 10% of the construction costs for the proposed maintenance and repairs of the device. Additionally, Cary's LDO needs to be updated to reflect the state's current requirements with regards to civil penalties for projects that violate erosion and sediment control laws. These amendments include new text that provides violators with the option to request a remission of a penalty from the North Carolina Sedimentation Control Commission. The amendment also directs that any civil penalties collected by Cary go to the state's civil penalty and forfeiture fund, and then the funds are then distributed to the local school system. Item B provides clarifications and corrections for references to town council to be consistent with the LDO, as well as current processes and procedures. Specifically, these references relate to the shift of most quasi-judicial decisions from council to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, as well as references to the approving body for plans or plats. And finally, item C updates the town code to align recycling cart roll-in fees with solid waste and yard waste roll-in fees. Town council public hearing was held on September 28, 2023. One written comment was submitted by a citizen requesting that Cary consider adopting higher standards than the state's minimum requirements. The mayor commented about how Cary has not been given authority to exceed these requirements under the state law. There was also a lot of discussion between council members, the town manager, and the town attorney about amendment item A and the financial implications of House Bill 488. How the changes to the SCM maintenance fee requirements in the LDO might impact Cary's budget, and whether any of the previously collected funds have ever been used for SCM repairs or improvement projects in the past. House Bill 488 also requires that any fees previously collected by a local government be made available if the SCM owner requests those funds for maintenance or repairs. As the council discussion continued, it was noted that Cary has never needed to use previously collected funds for SCMs, and at this time it is unknown how many SCM owners might request the previously paid fees. Moving forward, Cary will no longer collect SCM maintenance fees. However, these payments are not included in Cary's budget, and therefore no fiscal impacts are expected. There were no comments or discussion related to amendment items B or C. Since the public hearing, staff has not made any changes to the proposed amendments. Cary's LDO provides the standards and regulations needed to implement the Imagine Cary Community Plan. The plan was created with citizen input and adopted by council, and it provides Cary's vision for growth, development, and service. Implementation of the plan requires an up-to-date LDO with clear ordinances that keep us on strong legal footing. Staff finds these Act 31 amendments consistent with that purpose. This concludes staff's overview of the proposed Act 31 LDO amendments, and I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
I did neglect to say that obviously there's no applicant. Not that it really needs to be said, but I should have said it. This is all internal town request, but it still has to come through us. So sorry about leaving that out. All right. Questions? I'm just going to open it up. I do not have any questions. Just do any members to the left? Sean, go ahead.
For the SCM and the new 10% accounts, what does that mean for SCM owners? You know, and how is that going to be implemented? This is more a curiosity question. And then how does the town enforce that?
So the state actually, through the SCM requirements for design water quality regulations, already requires that maintenance and repairs are conducted. It is encouraged then HOAs, private owners, to set aside that money, and they're responsible. Ultimately, all private owners are responsible for that SCM. With the separate account, what we would likely do, we haven't worked out all of the bugs completely yet process-wise, but likely instead of requiring that collection of the payment prior to the final approval or accepting the SCM when it's completed, we would require proof that that fund or that account has been established.
And then there's no check on it? It just, so for one day, a piece of paper has to exist and then it can go away.
Right, they are required to establish the separate account for up to 10%. Unfortunately, if they use all of those funds and don't replenish it, it will still fall and revert back to the private owners, whether it's the HOA or a private commercial owner, to make those repairs. Our ordinance does require, and we do have enforcement capabilities if they do not maintain the device.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to ask a question that, this would be maybe some stormwater, that's a hot issue. So in the case of July of 2016, when we had a millennial flood of 5 inches in an hour or whatever it was, that floods, neighbors of mine were flooded. They were flooded because storm control measures were stopped up, but they were on private property, but they were put in by the HOA when the thing was developed. Is this anything that comes out of this funds, this 10%, is only would be used for like HOA owned or HOA areas that HOA owned or had or was deeded to, whatever, that they had built and that they currently have? Because if they put something through somebody's yard, they have no responsibility to keep that clean, or no responsibility to fix that if it's obstructed. Is that still correct?
The funds themselves and the account is strictly for the SCM. It is a state law, for the water quality and the detention runoff control requirements. It does not extend to, say, pipe networks or drainage conveyance. Those, if they're within the easement and they're put in by the HOA, and they would fall under HOA responsibility, usually that's covered in the HOA covenants. If it's not HOA responsibility, it would fall on the private property owners, where the drainage structure falls on their property.
So to be clear, if an HOA puts, or a builder puts in a pipe through your yard, and it goes to, in this case, Kildare Farm Lake, and it becomes obstructed, it's the homeowner's responsibility to unobstruct it if they don't want to be flooded or they don't want to flood their neighbors. But there's no teeth in anywhere we've got for that to be cleaned or maintained.
That's correct. We do not maintain drainage and drainage structures that are located on private property and owned by private owners.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about the roll cart fee.
Oh, Lord.
Have we,
Out of my wheelhouse.
have we always had a
Not
roll
stormwater.
cart fee? Because I feel extremely called out.
Yeah, no. Oh. So the issue was, we have a roll cart fee on the books that if you leave your can out for too long, you have a while though, you have like 48 hours to get it. But if you leave it out for too long, we have the local ordinance authority to assess a fine. The issue was that technically, for whatever reason, we missed it with recycling carts. So the way our ordinance was set up, it said, if your trash can is out, we can fine you. And then it says the fine is determined by the fee schedule. If you look at the fee schedule, it says for your cart or your recycling bin. So there was an inconsistency. So the intent was to make it abundantly clear that if you leave your recycling cart out, you could also potentially be subject to the fine. The fun fact here is, technically, you all don't need to give us an opinion about item C. It's only item A and item B. But because they all went before council together, you guys get it too. So we would still love to hear your opinion, but technically, it doesn't really matter. But from a process standpoint, from a general standpoint, from our citizens, we do want
Thank you.
Any questions down this end? Go
I
ahead.
had one quick question. You may have covered this, but I want to make sure I heard it right. What happens to all the monies that were paid previously?
So under House Bill 488, it allows for owners that have already paid those funds previously to request them
Okay.
for repairs and maintenance. That is something too, we are still in the process, figure out how necessarily that's going to work, but we're prepared for when it happens. We don't know how many owners will request that money. It was always submitted to us or paid to us for just that purpose. So therefore, if it's requested back, it will go back to them.
So the money is basically just going to be held, and I guess the thought is over time, slowly it will be depleted by some people that request it back.
Correct. They could request it back with the hope that they would also establish their separate fund
Right.
for a future.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions down here?
Maybe it's just me wanting to clarify. So with these funds, you're going to have individual, like it's going to be just individual bank accounts pretty much set up instead of having one pot.
That's correct.
Okay. So there's no recourse, kind of like if something goes wrong, that individual, we have no control over it.
Correct.
Any others down here? Good. Any other questions?
No, but just as a comment, just in case for some reason that stormwater item people have concerns about, it's the state law.
Yes.
We don't have a choice.
Hence why I have no questions. Would someone like to make a motion for Act 31 minor and technical amendments as discussed tonight?
I move that the board find Act 31 amendments of the Land Development Ordinance to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussed by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Second, thank you. Any comments since you made the motion?
As was said, it's law.
Okay. Any comments? You good? Any other comments? Okay, having said that, all in favor of the motion that's been put forward, say aye. Aye. Any against? Carries unanimously. Okay, we now move to new business, and the first item is pretty important, and that is we need to elect a vice chair. And the vice chair's role is obviously to function as the chair if I am unavailable. And it is totally permissible for an individual to nominate themselves. If we get more than one person nominated, then we will take a vote on the 2, 3, whatever is nominated. So I'll just open it up. Would anyone like to volunteer to serve in this capacity?
I'm happy to.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, having said that, that's awesome. Thank you, Mike. We need to vote on it. So all in favor of Mike taking the position as vice chair for the new term, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Congratulations. Okay, the last item is the 23-24 work plan. Everybody has a hard copy of that. And just basically, this is for people in the business world, this is a mission statement and of what we do. This was developed with prior boards, with the staff, and I am not going to go through this whole thing, but I'll give you a minute to glance at it if you haven't already seen it. But it is something that we have to, as a board, vote on to make it official and as part of the record. And basically, it's pretty all-encompassing of what we can do and what we will do in the new year. So, does anyone have any questions on the work plan that you have?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
So in looking over the 1 and 2 under the shall carry out the following duties, it is interesting that it starts with to formulate. Both of those start to formulate as opposed to review. So this puts the onus on us to understand what's out there and what might be needed out there, as opposed to just having stuff brought before us. And in order to do that, I think we need a plan internally, or I'd propose that, and I'm not making a motion to this, I'm just, as part of this discussion, that we do set aside rather, soon, but we make a plan to set aside a work session to discuss things that we might want to consider in formulating. Otherwise, we'll be sitting here a year from now just having reviewed, and stamped or denied. And I think that that's important, that if we're going to formulate something, we have to have time, just like other bodies do, of a work session. And we've had in the past with the community plan and formulating. But there may be things we'd like to see, or we'd like to get more information about, and even just be oriented maybe or better by the staff on things. So I would like to see. I'm in favor of the plan, but I don't want it just to be words and those introductions. I'd like for it to have teeth, and to have teeth, I think we need to decide it's worth a work session, a multi-hour work session quarterly, or some sort of session that we get into, that we consider things that might need to come to the council, but they might have questions. We might watch a meeting and they bring up some questions, and it might be worth us looking at it, but rather than just getting our agenda and answering questions. Just a comment on those two.
Okay. Any other comments? And just playing off that, just to let people know, we one of the things that really came from this board is, and the staff was super receptive to this, is when we see now anything related to EV installation, the board last year, obviously, we bugged the staff frequently. We brought it up, and mysteriously and miraculously, it is now being seen more and more often that we're getting these, because it was something very important. It seems like such a small thing, but it is something. And to your point, there are obviously other things like that we should bring to the staff for their consideration and evaluation, and then they would obviously take that to the council. But that is just one example. Am I leaving anything else out? That's probably the biggest one, isn't it? Yeah. So anyways, good point.
No, good point. I got my permit and they're coming tomorrow to put my EV thing in. So I don't have the car yet, but knock on wood. But no, and to recommend to the council is notice that, it doesn't say to, formulate, recommend to the staff. This is actually to take it to the council for things that we
Correct.
think as citizens need to happen in the town. And this is a powerful part of the planning and zoning's
That is
mission.
correct.
I agree.
I might add in the sentence right before these items, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that it says to carry these out as directed by town council. And so, they at any time could direct us to formulate or.
And have done so.
That is also
Have
true.
done so,
It hasn't happened in a while, but the town council can ask that the board look at something, evaluate something, just like we do with cases to get our opinion. That hasn't happened in a while, but it is something we have done a couple of times in the past. And that's also something, quite frankly, that I would work with our council liaison. Obviously, if we thought there was something like that, I would want that individual involved in anything we did from a work session or anything that we were going to formulate to take forward along with our key staff advisors. So, point taken.
And Matt, we do have the ability to have a subcommittee or table things or make motions on discussion on things out.
Basically, the function of doing that was, from a practical standpoint, we could make it an agenda item for you all to vote on, and then you have to act as a board. So, if some of you don't think it's a good idea, you can vote no, but if then the board does vote a majority, you can set up work sessions, you can do subcommittees, you can do all that kind of stuff. And then we would just have to do it on the record as agenda items. And then if you do set up work sessions and things like that, Julie would obviously need to know well ahead of time because we'd have to notice it because it would be a public meeting, because there would be a quorum of you all getting together. So there would be some logistical stuff too.
And that's probably a good reminder for new members.
Yes.
How many of us is quorum?
Well, it's the majority, so it's basically, if there's more than 5 of you, it's going to be a public meeting. Right. And luckily, they did have orientation, so they did get some of that.
And is there also the walking quorum? So if a quorum of us to do business is 2/3, right? Mm-hmm. So that's 6, right? So
Yeah.
then a majority of a walking quorum is 4.
Oh, man, you're really putting me on the spot, Ken. Basically, if there's going to be a lot of you together and you're going to be talking shop, tell Julie about it first.
We will.
That's the safest way to do it. And again, like we all talked about this, you guys are in a unique position because you are an advisory body, so all the rules that we're talking about, we can play a little bit faster and looser with, but it's all about optics, right? And again, the folks that were so lucky to join me for that riveting orientation, we talked about how whether or not there's a legal concern or not, the optics really matters to us, and we care deeply about the trust that our citizens have in this process, and we want to do everything we can to remove any question that you all are here doing what you're doing now, which is being the impartial citizen representatives, giving your thoughts and opinions in a manner that is consistent with the Cary Community Plan. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Got it.
Thanks, Matt.
Good. Any other thoughts? So basically, just to sum up, I think what I heard in the discussion is, yes, this group can come forward with ideas that they would like to propose to the town council. Yes, we can have work sessions to discuss those items. So if there are things you would like to bring forward with that, I'm certainly open to it. And I know that the staff would be here to support us. Our liaison would work with us. So just keep that in mind. And, I'm certainly, something we can talk about, okay? All right, if there's no further discussion, would someone make a motion? It's just a simple motion to approve the 23-24 planning and zoning work plan as it exists today.
I move that the board find our work plan adequate for the 2023-2024 work year.
Thank you. Would someone second that?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. That is all for our agenda tonight. I thank everyone for their participation. Again, welcome our new members. And that is it for tonight, so meeting adjourned. Thank you.